NBA expansion has been a topic of conversation for years because there are some fan bases out there that are desperate to get an NBA team and some markets out there that would do incredibly well with a team. But for a variety of different reasons, both in terms of team building as well as the health of the league overall, I firmly believe that not only is expansion exciting, but it's necessary to the future of the league. Now, when it comes to expansion, the things that people get really excited about are new fan bases, new cities, getting an opportunity to have an NBA team. But when it comes to the league itself, there's a couple of different reasons why I think this is going to be critical to the future of the league. First and foremost, I don't know if you guys have noticed, the league is unbelievably talented right now. Like when you look at all the teams across the league, when you look at how they're constructed, the futures of their teams, the young stars that they have, there's not really a team in the entire NBA that doesn't have a face of their franchise or doesn't have a core that you're really excited about. They might not be that good in actuality in the moment. They might not be a team that you're really excited about in terms of winning 50 games this year. They might only win 25 games, but they're unbelievably talented. And if their players pan out, they're going to end up being a good team within the next handful of seasons. And it goes beyond just some of the top players on the roster. The amount of depth and talent that are on these teams right now is incredible. And part of that has to do with the fact that we've gotten better at drafting, gotten better at developing players, and it's just a little bit easier to fit in as a high-level NBA player right now, so long as you can shoot. And that has really helped teams develop a ton of talent throughout the top 7 or 8 players on their roster. And even if the team isn't actually good, their future is pretty bright. But that also leads to this phenomenon where there's a handful of guys around the league right now that are 3rd, 4th, 5th options offensively that 10, 15 years ago might have been like the foundational cornerstone piece of a franchise moving forward. And once you start to get to that point where guys that would normally be, fixtures of a team are now the 3rd or 4th options, that's when you really need to start looking at expansion for the health of the league. In the past, when the league has expanded, they kind of did it at the wrong time because there just wasn't enough talent around the league. And then there were some really, really bad teams winning, 10, 11, 12 games. But now the NBA is in a really good place. I think that's one of the reasons they've hesitated to expand to this point, because they don't want to go through what they went through before with a lack of talent. But there's so much talent in the league right now that it's almost a necessity at this point to add at least 2 more franchises. And the other part of this as well, things that we've talked about in the past, is with the introduction of the second apron, with the way that salaries are going to be structured over the next 5 to 7 years in the league, is not only are those players that are currently 3rd and 4th options going to be treated that way offensively despite being unbelievably talented, but also they're going to get paid like 3rd and 4th options. And in seasons past where guys of that level would be getting $20-25 million a year, now they're going to be making more like 10, because if you're not one of the top 2 guys on a given team, you're not going to be getting that max or that supermax contract with the way that the second apron and the way that the salaries are going to be structured over the next handful of seasons in the NBA. And so if you add 2 or 4 more franchises, not only do you provide a platform for those players to grow and develop into the top level talents that they are, but also you provide 2 or 4, depending on how many teams you add, more max contract slots, or maybe even up to 8 max contract slots between 4 different teams available for players that are deserving of them, but in the current structure of the league might not actually receive those offers. And it's interesting to think about expansion in that sense, because most of the time we think about it in terms of the excitement of adding, teams and fan bases within the league. But when you think about how it could impact the health of the league, I really do think it's something that almost needs to happen at this point. And to me, it seems clear that this is the direction that the league wants to go. They don't want these, KD Warriors era super teams, those Cleveland teams during that era. They would much rather have all of their best players, all their stars get the spotlight the way that they should, the way that they deserve it. They want to have every team have 1 or 2 max contract guys. It's the way that they've structured the salaries, and expansion can help reach that goal as well. Think about what it would look like if Jaylen Brown was leading a Seattle team and he was the main star, the main guy. We'd get a better opportunity of what that would look like with Jaylen Brown as your best player. Think about someone like Josh Giddey or Jalen Williams, one of these guys eventually for Oklahoma City leading a Vegas or a Seattle team. That would be really exciting and really interesting. And I think that would be the goal of the league here, primarily with expanding, in addition to, of course, earning a ton more money. And then you start to think about the logistics of what expansion would actually look like within the NBA. Now, to me, it seems like if they're going to add 2 fan bases domestically, like within the States, not Mexico City or somewhere overseas, then it would be Seattle and Las Vegas appear to be the 2 teams at the very top of the list list for the NBA to be adding. Give Seattle back their team, and then Vegas is a city that's been adding sports organizations over the last couple of years, and seems to be pretty high on the list for the NBA as well. I don't think there would be any shortage of people around the world that would want to be owners of an NBA team should they add and expand. And I do think this is something that's going to happen soon. And also, from a content perspective, expanding is very exciting because you get into this concept of the NBA expansion draft, which I did a video on, I think 2 years ago at this point. Basically, the way that it would work is you would have teams would be able to protect a handful of players on their current roster that would not be eligible to be picked in an expansion draft. And then all those other players that are not protected, I believe it's either the top 6 or the top 8 players on your roster. You can pick between 6 to 8 guys. Everybody else would be eligible to be drafted by the new franchises. And so then you'd have some really interesting young players get top level opportunities. And then whoever they draft in their first couple of drafts would obviously be put, front and center for that franchise. And it would take a few years for the talent to really even out amongst the 32 or 34, however many, teams they add, total teams now across the league. But it would be a really interesting, certainly from a content perspective, but logistically as well, how exactly they would go about adding these new teams in. And I really fully believe, we've been talking about this for what feels like 10 years, but I really fully believe that this is going to happen, that they're going to add 2 teams. It's going to add to the revenue of the league, which is going to continue to add to the salaries and the continually rising salary cap, which we're going to talk about in some other videos here coming up as well. And it's just a really intriguing possibility for a league that is doing as well as you could expect them to, obviously, a few years past the league being completely shut down. And I think it's really important to think about expansion in that context, not just thinking about it in terms of being excited, but in terms of it being a necessity for the health of the league moving forward. Like, think about Oklahoma City, how much offensive talent they have on that team. SGA, Josh Giddey, Jalen Williams, Chet Holmgren, like those 4 guys, any one of them individually, if you put them on an expansion team, those guys would be the headline player for that expansion team because they have so much young talent. Same thing with teams like Houston, San Antonio, Orlando. Like, there's a couple of franchises that have, even if their teams right now individually aren't fantastic, they have so much talent that inevitably a few guys are going to get kind of overlooked and passed over, when if they did have that opportunity on a new team, they could maybe even flourish way more than you would have expected them to in Oklahoma City or Orlando or a variety of other places. And obviously that won't happen immediately. Like, all these teams that I'm mentioning, like, they would protect their top guys, top 6 or 8 guys, whatever the case may be. And of course, Giddey, Jalen Williams, Chet, those guys would all be part of the players that Oklahoma City would protect. And that's what I mean when I say it would take a few years for this to really all come together where you'd even out the talent. But it's clear that that's been a goal for the league with the way that they've added rules, with the way that they've added the second apron. They want some of these players that are 3rd, 4th, 5th options to flourish in other situations and not have as many of these quote unquote super teams. And expanding would continue to further the pursuit of that goal of spreading the talent around the league, of adding a little bit more parity into the league. And I really am excited to see what that would do for the future of the NBA. And what I want to know is down in the comment section below, what do you guys think about the league expanding? Do you think they should add 2 teams, 4 teams? Do you think it's a good idea? Do you think it's necessary for the future of the league? What are some players around the league that you think might not get protected by some of their top teams that could potentially be really good on an expansion team? Which cities do you want to see? Do you have logo or franchise name ideas? Any of that kind of stuff. I'm really excited about the possibility of what this could mean for the future of the league. Adam Silver continues to tease it and talk about it and reference it on occasion. LeBron reportedly wants to be an owner of one of the teams eventually once he retires. All that stuff. I want to know what you guys think about this and what could be a there might be people watching this video right now that don't have an NBA team, that aren't a fan of an NBA team, and you just like the NBA overall. You could have a team within the next couple of seasons, and that to me is unbelievably exciting for the future of the league.